Today we're diving into one of the great, paradoxes of modern business. It's the story of a company that literally invented the future and then somehow failed to compete in it. It is the ultimate cautionary tale about the digital revolution, and honestly, its lessons are more relevant now than ever. So, this is the big question, right? This is what we're going to unpack. How is it even possible to hold the future in your hands? To be the one who creates it and still get completely left behind? Well, to get this, you first have to understand just how massive Kodak once was.
90%. At its peak, Kodak controlled pretty much 90% of the entire global film market. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. That kind of dominance, it's almost hard to imagine. Kodak wasn't just a company, it was a cultural icon. The phrase, "a Kodak moment," was literally part of our everyday language.
And here's where the paradox really kicks in. See, Kodak wasn't caught off guard by some outside competitor they didn't see coming. No, the seeds of its own destruction were planted from within, right at the absolute height of its power.
Their business model was just brilliant. It's the classic razor and blade strategy you hear about. You sell the camera itself for a low price, maybe even at a loss, because you know you're going to make an absolute fortune on the recurring sales of film, chemicals, and photo printing. That model was a money-printing machine. This timeline just lays out the tragedy perfectly. So get this, 1975. A Kodak engineer invents the very first digital camera. They saw the future, decades before anyone else. But fast forward to the 90s, and the company's still peaking, riding that huge film wave. By the 2000s, competitors, who had no film business to protect, were going all in on digital. And by 2012, it was over. Kodak filed for bankruptcy. So why? Why did this happen? It wasn't a lack of innovation, that's for sure. They had the innovation in-house. The failure was purely strategic. And we can really break it down into three distinct fatal flaws that just completely paralyzed the company.
So the first and, probably the biggest flaw was something called business model lock-in. Kodak was just so deeply stuck in its incredibly profitable film business, that whole razor and blades thing we just talked about, that it couldn't bring itself to imagine a world without it. Any move towards digital felt like a direct attack on its own profits.
This quote just sums it up perfectly. From where Kodak was sitting, the real problem with digital photography was that it was too good. It completely eliminated the need for film, for processing, for printing. It got rid of their entire revenue engine. In the end, they were just organizationally incapable of embracing the very technology they created.
And that leads us right to the second flaw, a deep, deep fear of cannibalization. This is a classic innovator's dilemma, right here. The leadership knew digital was coming. They weren't blind, but they were terrified that if they launched digital products, it would just eat away at their film sales, which were, still making them a ton of money in the short term.
So what did they do? They made a calculated, but ultimately a catastrophic choice. They got that digital was important, but they decided to delay it, to slow walk it, hoping they could just squeeze a few more profitable years out of film. Meanwhile, their competitors, companies like Canon and Sony, they had no film business to protect. For them, it was all upside. They had nothing to lose, so they went for it full speed ahead.
And the final nail in the coffin? The execution gap. See, inventing something is one thing. Building a successful business around it is a whole different ballgame. Even when Kodak finally tried to get into the digital market, they just couldn't execute properly.
They focused on making digital cameras, the hardware, but the world was already shifting again. The value wasn't in the camera anymore, it was moving to software, to photo-sharing platforms like Flickr, and then of course Instagram. By the time Kodak got serious, the smartphone was already on the scene, combining the camera, the software, and the network all in one device. It made their entire strategy obsolete before it even got off the ground.
And here's why this story is so critical to understand. Kodak isn't some weird, isolated case. This pattern, this story of a huge, dominant company failing to adapt, it happens over and over and over again.
A perfect parallel is Blockbuster. Just like Kodak was addicted to film revenue, Blockbuster was completely addicted to late fees. That was a huge chunk of their profit. So when Netflix came along with this new subscription model with no late fees, Blockbuster just couldn't bring itself to kill its own cash cow, even when it was clear that's what it would take to save the company.
Or think about Nokia. Man, like Kodak, Nokia was a world-class hardware company. They made incredible phones, you could drop them and they wouldn't break, but when the iPhone and Android showed up, the whole game changed. It wasn't about who had the best hardware anymore, it was about who had the best software ecosystem, the operating system, the apps, the developers. Nokia, just like Kodak, completely missed that shift from a product to a platform.
But these lessons go way beyond just technology disruption. Strategic failure can pop up in all kinds of ways, and not even today's giants are safe.
For instance, take Uber's attempt to conquer China. Even though they were dominating the rest of the world, they just burned through billions of dollars before getting totally outmaneuvered by their local competitor, Didi. The lesson there? Sometimes the smartest strategic move is recognizing you're in an unwinnable fight and just getting out.
And then you've got a story like WeWork, which kind of shows that you can fail even without a direct competitor disrupting you. Their big problem was a totally flawed business model and really poor governance, all masked by this obsession with hypergrowth. Eventually, the market called their bluff. It's proof that, in the end, the fundamentals always matter.
Okay, so let's try to distill all of this down into a few clear, really crucial takeaways. What have we actually learned from watching these giants fall?
First up, and this is the absolute core lesson from Kodak, you cannot protect your way into the future. It doesn't work. If a new technology, especially one you invented, threatens your current business model, you have to find a way to embrace it and evolve. Resisting is just a losing game.
Second, from the Blockbuster story, you have to always focus on the customer. New business models that remove pain points and just make life easier for people, like getting rid of annoying late fees or not having to drive to a store, they will almost always win in the long run.
And finally, the really critical lesson from Nokia. In modern tech, the best product doesn't always win. The best ecosystem does. The value has shifted away from the physical thing in your hand to the whole network of software, services, and developers that's built around it.
So I'll just leave you with this question to think about. Every organization, every team, heck, every one of us has a film revenue of our own. Some comfortable, profitable way of doing things that we're afraid to let go of. The key is to figure out what it is and then have the courage to disrupt it yourself before someone else does it for you.